Evan sat at the far end of the dining hall on the space station. The long, metallic table stretched across the room, filled with people, but he was lost in his own thoughts. The usual hum of voices around him barely registered. His mind drifted as he finished the last bite of his sandwich, looking out of the wide observation windows. Outside, space stretched endlessly, like an ocean of black with little lights scattered across it. His life had been the same for the past few years: cargo runs, supply missions, and long stretches of solitude. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest. He was a cargo pilot, traveling from one station to another, picking up and dropping off supplies, and occasionally delivering messages. He'd never expected anything more from life, and he was fine with that. As he leaned back in his chair, he noticed someone new sitting in the corner of the dining hall. She was alone. Most people in the station were too busy to pay attention to her, but Evan couldn't help but notice. She was an alien. Tall, with skin that shimmered faintly in the light, as if made of smooth glass. Her clothes were elegant and strange, flowing in patterns Evan had never seen before. Despite the alien beauty, she looked out of place. The room, with its cold, clinical walls, didn't seem to belong to someone like her. Evan had seen plenty of aliens before. Some were traitors, some were diplomats, and some were just passing through. But there was something about this woman that felt different. She didn't speak to anyone, nor did anyone speak to her. She sat quietly, her eyes occasionally lifting to look around the room. But she never engaged with anyone. Evan didn't know what made him decide to approach her. Maybe it was the way she sat there alone, or maybe it was the feeling that he had nothing to lose. So he stood up and walked over to her, his boots echoing in the empty space between them. "Is this seat taken?" he asked gently. She looked up, her eyes meeting his for the first time. They were a deep shade of violet, strange and beautiful. For a moment, there was silence. Then she smiled, and in her soft, melodic voice, she spoke. "No," she said. "Please sit." Evan sat down, feeling a little awkward. He wasn't used to talking to strangers, especially not aliens. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy, until Evan finally spoke again. "I'm Evan," he said. "I haven't seen you around before. Are you new here?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, I'm just passing through." There was a pause as she seemed to look past him, as though lost in thought. Evan wasn't sure what to say next. But then he noticed her gaze drift to the meal in front of her, a small plate of fruits and vegetables, untouched. She looked at it like it was foreign, as if she didn't know what to do with it. Evan had learned long ago that in space, it was easy to get lonely. He had met all sorts of people, some friendly, some not so much, but loneliness was something he could understand. It was one of the few things everyone in space had in common. He reached into his bag and pulled out the sandwich he had packed for himself. It wasn't much, but it would be enough. "Would you like some?" he asked, holding out the sandwich. "I can't finish it all, and I don't mind sharing." The alien woman looked at the sandwich for a long moment, her violet eyes studying it with curiosity. Then, to Evan's surprise, she smiled again and nodded. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't need much, but this is kind." Evan smiled back and handed her the sandwich. She took a small bite, chewing slowly as if savoring the taste. Evan watched her, unsure of what to say, but feeling strangely at ease in her presence. The silence between them was no longer awkward, but comfortable. "You're far from home," Evan said after a while. "I mean, I've never seen someone like you on the station before. What brings you here?" She set the sandwich down and looked at him with a strange intensity. "I am not just passing through," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I have a mission." Evan raised an eyebrow.
"A mission? What kind of mission?" But she didn't answer.
Instead, she looked out the window, her gaze distant, almost as though she were lost in thought. Evan waited, but it was clear that she wasn't going to elaborate. For a moment, Evan wondered if he had said something wrong. He was just a cargo pilot after all. What did he know about missions or politics or anything that didn't involve hauling supplies? He was used to being on the outside of things, watching from the sidelines, the kind of person who no one really paid attention to. "I didn't mean to pry," Evan said after a while, shifting in his seat. "It's just, you don't seem like someone who's here just to pass time. You have a presence." The alien woman looked back at him, her smile returning. It was a small smile, but there was something knowing in it. "You're observant," she said. "I appreciate that." Evan shrugged, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "It's just how I am. I'm not used to the station being so quiet. People usually just pass through without noticing each other." And she nodded. "Most do." They fell into silence again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Evan felt like he was beginning to understand her in a way. She wasn't like the others on the station, distracted, focused on their work, always in a hurry. There was something peaceful about her, like she had all the time in the world.
"Do you have a name?" Evan asked, breaking the silence once again. "Yes," she said, her smile widening just a little.
"My name is Syria." Evan nodded. "Syria," he repeated softly. The name felt important, like it meant something more than just a name. But he couldn't quite place it. For a moment, Saraya simply sat there, watching him. Her gaze felt like it was looking straight through him, as if she could see things about him that he couldn't even see in himself. It was an unnerving feeling, but Evan didn't shy away. There was something about her that made him want to stay, to understand. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, breaking the silence again. "I don't mean to make you uncomfortable." Evan smiled. "No, it's fine. I'm just not used to talking to someone like you." Saraya looked at him, her expression softening.
"You've done a kindness," she said simply. "That's more than most people offer."
"I just gave you some food. It wasn't anything special." But Saraya shook her head.
"You don't understand, do you?" Evan frowned, unsure of what she meant.
Understand what? She met his eyes, and for the first time he saw something ancient and wise, in her gaze. "In this galaxy, there are those who hold power," she said quietly. "Power to change things, to reshape the stars themselves. And then there are those who offer kindness. And sometimes, Evan, it is the smallest acts of kindness that hold the most power." Evan didn't know how to respond. He wasn't sure what she was getting at, but something about her words resonated deep inside him, as if they were speaking to a part of him he hadn't realized was there. She was talking about something much bigger than lunch, and for some reason, he couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation was just the beginning. Saraya finished the last of the sandwich and stood up. She looked down at Evan, her expression unreadable. "Thank you, Evan," she said. "You've done more than you know." And then, before he could say anything else, she turned and left, disappearing into the corridors of the station. Evan sat there, staring after her, his mind racing. He had no idea who she was, or what she meant by her words. But one thing was clear. This was no ordinary encounter. He had no way of knowing that this simple act of kindness would change his life forever. Evan couldn't stop thinking about Saraya. She had left the station without a trace, disappearing into the halls as though she had never been there at all. But in the hours after she had gone, he found that her presence lingered in his mind, like an echo of something important he had yet to understand. The next few days were quiet, almost too quiet. The station buzzed with its usual activity, but Evan's thoughts kept drifting back to the brief conversation he had with Saraya. What did she mean when she said that small acts of kindness could hold the most power? He wasn't sure. It was just lunch. He hadn't done anything special. Yet somehow she had looked at him as if he had done something extraordinary. He tried to focus on his work, loading cargo and managing supplies for the next transport. but his mind kept wandering back to her words. Power, kindness, the galaxy. It all felt so much bigger than anything he had ever known. He was just a cargo pilot. What did he have to do with any of it? On the third day after Soraya's departure, something strange happened. Evan was sitting in the common room, sipping coffee and reading through the latest reports when he noticed a group of men in dark uniforms entered the station. They were dressed in the typical garb of galactic military officers, their faces serious and stern. At first he thought nothing of it. The station often received high-ranking officers, so he had learned to ignore them. But as they passed, one of them stopped and glanced directly at Evan. The officer was tall, with dark hair and a chiseled jaw, and his gaze was sharp. Evan felt a chill run down his spine. There was something about the officer's look that made him uneasy. The officer didn't speak to him, but there was a strange sense of recognition in his eyes, like he knew something Evan didn't. The moment passed quickly, and the officers moved on, disappearing into the depths of the station. Evan thought little of it, though he couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of unease. Later that day, he received an unexpected message. It was from Soraya. "Meet me at the docking bay," the message said simply. "I have something important to discuss." Evan's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected to hear from her again, and yet, there it was, an invitation to meet. Without thinking, he grabbed his jacket and headed for the docking bay. As he walked through the quiet halls of the station, his mind raced. What could she want to talk about? Had he done something wrong? Was it about the officers he had seen earlier? When he reached the docking bay, he saw her immediately. Soraya stood near the airlock, her figure illuminated by the soft glow of the bay's lights. She was waiting for him, as calm and composed as ever. There was no sign of the urgency or fear that Evan had been expecting. She looked at him with a serene smile. But there was something in her eyes, a depth that made him feel as though he were standing on the edge of something vast and unknown. "You came," she said, her voice soft but full of warmth. Evan nodded, unsure of what to say. "You asked me to meet you?" "I did," she replied, her smile widening slightly. "But you don't need to worry. This isn't a call for help or a plea for aid. I simply wanted to speak with you again." Evan stood in front of her, feeling an odd mixture of awe and confusion. "I didn't think I'd see you again," he said.
"What is it you wanted to talk about?" Soraya's expression shifted. She looked out at the stars beyond the station, her gaze distant.
"There are many things in the galaxy that people don't understand. Most think power is about strength or control, about having the ability to dominate others. But true power, the kind that matters, is something different. It's the ability to influence, to shape the future, not through force, but through subtlety, through small acts of kindness, through connections that seem insignificant to others." Evan listened carefully, though he still wasn't entirely sure where this conversation was leading.
"I don't understand," he said honestly.
"What does that have to do with me?" Soraya turned her eyes back to him, her expression intense yet gentle. "You have something inside you, Evan. A strength that doesn't come from physical power or military might. It's something rarer, something I have seen in very few humans." Evan felt his chest tighten. He didn't think of himself as anything special. He was just a cargo pilot, a man who spent his days moving supplies from one place to another. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't anyone important. "You're wrong," he said quietly, shaking his head. "I'm just a regular guy. I don't have anything special inside me." But Soraya's eyes softened, and she took a step closer to him. "That's where you're wrong, Evan. You've already proven it. Your kindness, the way you treat others without expecting anything in return, that's the kind of strength I'm talking about." Evan frowned, trying to wrap his head around her words. "But I didn't do anything extraordinary," he said. "I just gave you my lunch." Soraya smiled again, but this time it was different. It wasn't just a polite smile. It was filled with meaning. "It wasn't the lunch, Evan. It was the gesture. It was the fact that you saw someone in need and offered what you could, without hesitation.
That's the kind of power that can change the galaxy. Evan felt his heart race.
The idea was too big for him to grasp fully. Power wasn't about weapons or armies or conquest. It was about kindness.
Why are you telling me this? Evan asked. Why me?
I don't have any influence. I'm just a cargo pilot.
Because, Evan, you have the potential to be more than just a cargo pilot.
You have the potential to change the course of history. The galaxy is at a crossroads, and there are those who wish to reshape it with force and fear. But they don't understand the true power of compassion, of unity. That's where you come in.
Before Evan could respond, a loud voice echoed through the docking bay. Lieutenant Soraya, the voice called.
We need to talk. Evan turned to see the officer from earlier, the one who had made him feel uneasy, standing near the entrance of the docking bay. He was accompanied by several others, all wearing the same dark uniforms. The officers had returned. Saria turned to face them, her expression unchanging.
Not now, she said firmly. I am speaking with someone. You can wait.
The officer stepped forward, his posture rigid.
This is urgent. We have orders to bring you in.
The situation has changed.
There's no time for discussion. Evan looked between Soraya and the officers.
Something was happening, something big. He could feel the tension rising in the air, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Soraya glanced back at Evan, her expression softening.
I'll be fine, Evan.
But this is where our paths must diverge for now.
What's going on? Soraya didn't answer directly. Instead, she turned back to the officers.
I'll come with you, she said. But remember what I've told you.
There's more at stake here than just power. The officers nodded stiffly, and Soraya turned to Evan. One last time.
You'll understand soon enough. Just remember, kindness holds more power than you think.
As she followed the officers out of the docking bay, Evan stood there, his mind racing. What had just happened? What did Soraya mean? And why did he feel like the galaxy was on the verge of something unimaginable? He didn't have the answers yet, but he knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. Evan couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The words Soraya had spoken echoed in his mind, louder now than ever. Power, kindness, influence. He couldn't stop thinking about them. What had she meant by all of it? He was still trying to make sense of everything when the officers led her away. He went back to his quarters that evening, but the quiet of the room only made the questions in his mind grow louder. There was a gnawing feeling in his gut, a sense that he was meant to do something, that he was involved in something far larger than himself. It was the kind of feeling that couldn't be ignored, no matter how much he tried to push it away. The next day passed in a blur. He carried out his usual duties, moving cargo and running errands. But his thoughts never strayed far from Soraya and the officers. Why had she asked him to meet her? Why had she chosen him? He was just a simple cargo pilot. As the hours wore on, he found himself wandering through the station again, his feet taking him to places he hadn't meant to go. He ended up in the station's observation deck, staring out at the stars. The endless expanse of space had always fascinated him, but now it felt distant, cold. The stars seemed so far away, like they didn't belong to him at all. They were a world he would never truly understand. His mind returned to Soraya. There was so much he didn't know about her. She was more than just an alien diplomat. She was someone with power, a power that went beyond what he had ever imagined, and that power had drawn him in. He couldn't stop thinking about what she had said, that small acts of kindness held more power than anyone realized. He wanted to understand. As Evan stood there, lost in his thoughts, the sound of footsteps behind him broke the silence. He turned to see a familiar face. It was Lieutenant Harris, one of the officers from earlier, the same officer who had looked at him strangely in the hallway. His presence now seemed even more imposing than before.
Evan?
Harris said, his tone brisk.
I need to speak with you.
Evan swallowed hard, his stomach tightening. What's this about? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Harris stepped closer, his expression unreadable. I know you're involved with Soraya, he said, his voice low.
And I need to know everything you know about her. Evan hesitated, caught off guard by the directness of the question. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, though his voice wavered slightly. Don't lie, Harris snapped. We've been keeping an eye on her for some time now.
She's more than she appears, and we know you're connected to her. You've been in contact with her, haven't you? Evan's heart raced. He didn't know what to say. He couldn't explain what had happened. How could he? It was impossible to put into words the strange connection he felt, the way she had looked at him, as though she saw something he didn't.
I haven't done anything, Evan said, shaking his head. I'm just a cargo pilot.
I don't know what you're talking about. Paris stared at him for a long moment, as if measuring his words. Then he sighed, seeming to relax just slightly.
You might be more involved in this than you think. You might want to reconsider your position, Evan.
This is bigger than you realize.
Before Evan could respond, Harris turned and walked away, leaving Evan standing there, confused and unsettled. His mind raced, trying to piece together what had just happened. What had Harris meant by that? And why had Soraya chosen him? Days passed, and life on the station continued as usual. But the feeling of unease never left Evan. He couldn't get rid of the questions swirling in his mind. What had Soraya meant when she said that small acts of kindness held more power than anyone knew? And why had she said it to him? Evan found himself returning to the observation deck every day, drawn to the stars, as though they held the answers he was searching for. But every time he stood there, looking out at the vastness of space, the answers seemed to slip further and further away. Then, one morning, the answer came to him in a way he hadn't expected. He had just finished a cargo run, moving supplies from one end of the station to the other. As he walked back to his quarters, he passed a small, unmarked door near the docking bay. Something about it caught his attention, and without thinking, he walked toward it. The door was barely visible, hidden in the shadows of the station's industrial corridors. He reached for the handle, the metal cold under his fingers. The door creaked open, and Evan stepped inside, his heart racing. What was he doing? Why had he felt the need to come here? He didn't know, but something compelled him to move forward. Inside, the room was dark, lit only by a faint, flickering light from a console in the corner. The air was thick with the smell of old machinery and unused space. It felt wrong, like he shouldn't be there. But he pressed on, his feet carrying him across the room to the console. He reached out and touched the screen. Immediately, the display flickered to life, revealing a series of images and files. They were classified, restricted. There were reports, images of Soraya, and data that didn't make sense.
Evan's eyes widened as he scrolled through the files. It was clear that the officers knew more about Soraya than they had let on.
She wasn't just a diplomat. She was involved in something much larger. She was tied to a secret organization, one that operated in the shadows, manipulating events across the galaxy. And there was something else, something he couldn't quite understand. The file stopped on a particular image, an image of Soraya. But this time, she wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a man, his face obscured by a black mask. There were symbols on his armor, symbols Evan had never seen before. The file labeled him as a leader, but it didn't say who he was or what he wanted. A chill ran down Evan's spine. What was all of this? What had Soraya gotten herself involved in? Before he could investigate further, The door behind him creaked open, and he turned to see a figure step inside. It was Soraya. "Evan," she said softly, her voice calm but filled with something else.
"I knew you would come." Evan stared at her, his mind racing. "What is all of this?" he asked.
"What are you involved in?" Soraya's expression was unreadable, but her eyes were gentle as she stepped closer. "This is what I didn't want you to know just yet," she said. "But it seems the time has come." She paused, her gaze locking with his. "Evan, the galaxy is on the brink of something monumental. There are forces at work that you can't even begin to understand. And the kindness you've shown is just the beginning. The choices you make from here on will shape everything." Evan took a step back, his mind spinning.
"What do you mean? What are you asking me to do?"
Soraya smiled, a sad, knowing smile.
"I'm not asking you to do anything, but I am asking you to understand."
You have more power than you know, and now, it's time for you to choose. As the words hung in the air, Evan felt the weight of the moment settle over him. The galaxy was changing, and he was a part of it, whether he was ready or not. Evan stood in the dimly lit room, staring at Soraya. Her words hung in the air like a heavy weight pressing down on him. The galaxy was on the brink of something monumental. He had always lived his life in the quiet, unremarkable corners of space, far from the battles and politics that shaped the universe. But now, it seemed like he was a part of something much bigger, something he couldn't ignore. Soraya's calm presence seemed to fill the room. She wasn't just an alien diplomat. She was a key figure in a vast, invisible web of power, one that stretched across galaxies and spanned centuries. Evan had seen the files on the console. He had seen the symbols, the strange man beside her in the images, and the cryptic messages. But even now, he didn't fully understand what it all meant. "Why me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you bring me into this?" She stepped closer to him, her movements graceful but purposeful.
"I didn't bring you into this, Evan."
You've always been a part of it. I only showed you the path.
Your actions, your choices have always mattered more than you know. He felt a tightness in his chest, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He had never asked for any of this. He was just a cargo pilot, a simple man who had offered a piece of his lunch to an alien woman. But now, it seemed that kindness, the simplest of gestures, had led him down a path he didn't understand. "Why the secrecy?" Evan asked, his voice strained. "Why all the lies? The files? The masked man? What is all of this?" Soraya looked away, her expression turning distant for a moment. "There are things you cannot know yet," she said softly. "Things that must remain hidden, for the sake of the galaxy. But the time will come when you must know the truth."
Evan felt frustration building inside him.
"What truth? All I know is that I've been dragged into something I don't understand. I don't know who to trust anymore." "The officers! You can trust me," Soraya interrupted, her voice firm yet gentle. "And you must trust yourself." "You are stronger than you realize. The choices you make will shape the future. Not just your future, but the future of the galaxy." Evan shook his head, trying to clear the confusion that clouded his mind. "I'm not cut out for this. I'm not a leader. I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who delivers cargo."
That's where you're wrong, Evan.
You've already shown that you are capable of great things. You've shown kindness, compassion. Those are qualities that the galaxy desperately needs. The path ahead of you won't be easy, but you don't have to walk it alone. Evan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He couldn't keep running from the truth. Soraya was right. He had been given a choice, and he could either walk away or face the unknown. But walking away wasn't an option anymore. Too much was at stake. "Tell me what I need to do," Evan said, his voice steady now, a new determination in his eyes. Soraya smiled, a small, knowing smile.
There is a force gathering in the galaxy, one that seeks to control and dominate. They want to rewrite the future through fear and force.
But they don't understand the true nature of power. That is where you come in.
Evan frowned. What do you mean?
You have the power to bring people together, Soraya said.
The power to unite those who are divided, to inspire hope where there is none. That is the kind of power that can change the galaxy.
But it won't be easy. You'll face enemies both seen and unseen.
You'll be tested in ways you can't imagine. But if you can stay true to yourself, to the kindness that you have shown, you will prevail. Evan nodded slowly, still unsure of what all of this meant, but something deep inside him told him that Soraya was right. The galaxy was changing, and whether he was ready or not, he was part of that change. His simple act of kindness had set something in motion, something that could not be undone.
"Where do I begin?"
he asked, his voice steady but laced with uncertainty. Soraya's gaze turned serious, and she stepped back, her expression hardening.
The first step is to meet with those who are already fighting against the forces that seek to dominate the galaxy. There are allies out there, waiting for someone to lead them.
But they need someone they can trust. Someone who understands the true nature of power. Evan felt a surge of determination. I'll do it. I'll help them. I'll lead them.
Soraya nodded, her approval evident in her eyes.
You are ready, Evan. But remember, you must always stay true to yourself. The galaxy is full of those who would use you, manipulate you for their own gain. But if you remember the kindness you have shown, you will remain on the right path. Evan looked at her, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't fully understand everything that was happening, but he knew one thing. The future was in his hands. He couldn't run from it anymore. He had to face it head on.
"Where do I find these allies?" he asked, his voice filled with resolve.
There is a planet, Soraya said, her tone lowering. It's called Valorath. It's a neutral ground, a place where those who fight for freedom have gathered in secret. They are the first step. But be careful, Evan. There are eyes everywhere, and not all of them are friendly.
Evan's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. "I'll be careful." Soraya smiled, a look of pride in her eyes.
I know you will. And remember, Evan, this is only the beginning.
What happens next will depend on you. With those final words, Soraya turned and walked toward the door, her figure disappearing into the shadows.
Evan stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of everything she had told him. The galaxy was at war, but it wasn't a war that could be won through force alone. It was a battle for hearts and minds, and Evan had the power to lead it. But he had to stay true to who he was, to the kindness he had shown. Taking a deep breath, he stepped toward the door, ready to face whatever came next. The galaxy was waiting, and it was up to him to shape its future.